The million-dollar machine died right in front of everyone, investors, engineers, and a CEO who looked ready to explode. While panic spread through the crowd, a quiet 16-year-old farm kid stepped forward and said, "I can fix it." What happened next didn't just save the demo, it exposed a buried legacy Agronova tried to erase. Hi everyone, today we're about to witness what happens when arrogance, technology, and quiet brilliance collide right in the middle of a cornfield in Nebraska. This story isn't about some courtroom drama or a flashy showdown in a glass-walled office. No, this one starts with a million-dollar machine and ends with a teenager changing the game. Because when power is abused in plain sight, sometimes justice comes in muddy boots and calloused hands. This could happen to anyone, even you. So before we dive into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, what state are you watching from and what time is it right now? It was 9:17 a.m. on a Wednesday when the combine harvester died. The sun had just started to bite through the overcast sky above the Agro-Nova demonstration field outside Lincoln, Nebraska, turning the gravel lot into a pale shimmer of heat. A crowd of 50 or so had gathered, investors in polos and designer sunglasses, mid-level engineers with clipboards and caffeine breath, and a few local farmers standing off to the side with arms crossed and brows raised. Some had traveled in from Iowa, Missouri, even Kansas, just to get a first look at what Agronova was calling the future of American farming. The harvester, sleek gunmetal gray and nearly the size of a small cabin, sat motionless at the edge of the test field. Just 10 minutes earlier, it had rolled off the trailer like a tank with intelligence. The AVX-91 fully autonomous, GPS-mapped, sensor-guided, AI-integrated, and worth $1, $3 million. It was supposed to start its pre-programmed harvest path across the field, weaving and calibrating in real-time, showcasing its advanced terrain learning algorithm. But 3 feet into its run, the machine hiccuped. A sharp metallic whine came from its side, followed by a clunk, loud enough to hush the crowd. And then, nothing. The whirring sensors went silent. The touch screen in the mobile control station turned red. The harvester just sat there, like a dying bull in the middle of a rodeo. At the center of it all stood Raymond Stratton, CEO of Agronova. 52 broad-shouldered, slick gray hair that defied the breeze, a wristwatch that cost more than a tractor. Stratton wasn't one for delays, and certainly not in front of investors. He turned sharply toward one of the engineers. "What the hell just happened?" he barked. The engineer stammered something about a voltage fault. Stratton waved it off. "Fix it. Now." The man jogged over to the machine, opened a panel, unplugged a cable, plugged it back in. Nothing. Another engineer tried a diagnostic reboot. The screen froze halfway through loading. A few investors exchanged awkward glances. One chuckled under his breath. Stratton did not find it funny. He spun on his heel and looked toward the support crew, local hands hired to help with setup and logistics. A few teenagers in flannel and overalls stood off to the side, holding power cables and folding chairs. One of them, thin, quiet, maybe 16, was leaning against the back of a flatbed trailer, his hands in his pockets. "You," Stratton snapped, pointing. "You know someone around here who can fix this thing? Maybe your uncle or your mechanic daddy, or you just gonna stand there watching my company fall apart?" The boy pushed off the trailer slowly. His overalls were dusty, his shirt faded, and his boots looked like they'd been through more than one growing season. "I can fix it," he said. The words didn't come out loud, but they cut through the murmurs like a blade through silk. Stratton squinted at him. "What I said? I can fix it, sir." The laughter started with one of the younger engineers, then another. "You got a wrench in those pockets," one of them muttered. "What is he, some kind of rural hacker?" Stratton, ever the showman, smirked. "Fine, let the kid take a look. Maybe the machine will start out of pity." The crowd parted slightly as the boy approached. He didn't move fast, didn't swagger, just walked straight to the harvester and knelt beside the side panel. He pulled a multi-tool from his back pocket, wiped his hands once on his jeans, and started inspecting the machine like he'd already studied it for years. "What's your name, kid?" one of the engineers called out. "Eli," he said, not looking up. "Eli Bennett." The name didn't register for most, not yet. Eli unscrewed a panel, gently exposing the diagnostic port and power routing. He moved through the connections like someone threading a familiar needle. His fingers found the auxiliary relay, tapped a few key points, flipped a toggle most engineers hadn't even noticed, and held down a reset button for 10 seconds. Then he stood up. "Try it now," he said. The engineer in the control booth hesitated. "You serious?" Eli nodded. The ignition switch clicked. The engine rumbled to life. The reel at the front began to turn steady and even. The screen blinked green. The machine rolled forward, recalibrating its path, and continued as if nothing had ever gone wrong. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't move. They just stared. The engineer blinked twice. "What did you do?" "Rerouted the power load. Your default firmware boot pulls too much current when it's over 85 degrees outside. It drains from the wrong port, overrides the sensor boot loop. I bypassed the logic stack." The man looked at him like he'd spoken Greek, and then the murmurs started again. "Did he say, 'Bennett, wait'? Like that, Bennett?" "No way." But the only person not surprised was Eli himself. He wiped his hands on his jeans again, nodded politely, and turned back toward the trailer like nothing happened. Behind him, Raymond Stratton wasn't smiling anymore. He was staring at the name that had haunted Agronova for over a decade. Bennett. Raymond Stratton didn't move. His eyes were locked on the kid, walking away each step, raising more dust than the last. He wasn't just thinking about what had just happened, he was scrambling to make sense of it. That name. That damn name. Bennett. A few of the older engineers had already gone pale. One of them leaned in and whispered, "You think he's related?" "Has to be," the other replied. "No one else around here messes with firmware like that." Stratton turned slowly to his assistant, whispering behind clenched teeth, "Get me everything we have on this kid. Now." But someone beat her to it. Maya Townsend, VP of Product Development, had already pulled up a local employee waiver signed the day before. Eli Bennett, 16, lives outside Raymond, Nebraska. Father's name, Gideon. That was the confirmation Stratton needed. It felt like a punch to the stomach. He looked out across the field again, but Eli was gone. Back behind the trailer, probably with the other local hands, pretending this wasn't a moment that just cracked open history like an eggshell. For Stratton, it wasn't just about the demo anymore. It was about the past he thought he'd buried. Because 12 years earlier, Gideon Bennett nearly burned Agronova to the ground with nothing more than the truth. Back then, Gideon had been their golden boy, a gifted systems engineer with a sixth sense for mechanical design. He didn't have a fancy degree, but he didn't need one. His ideas made prototypes fly, and his tweaks turned disasters into innovations. When Agronova first began developing smart farming technology, Gideon's name was on almost every whiteboard, until he caught them cutting corners. Agronova's early models had a flaw, one that Gideon flagged over and over. The safety redundancy system had been stripped down to save cost. Instead of replacing a failed part with a backup, it would attempt a software patch mid-cycle, something that could lock up the entire steering system if it happened during movement. For a combine that weighed 8 tons, that kind of failure wasn't a glitch. It was a lawsuit waiting to happen. Or worse. Gideon spoke up, first in private memos, then in team meetings, then to the board. Stratton was new back then, hungry to impress investors, and allergic to problems that delayed launches. When Gideon refused to stay quiet, Stratton made a choice. He labeled Gideon uncooperative. Internal HR flagged him as a cultural liability. The final straw, Gideon shared the schematics with a farming co-op that was testing the machines, not for profit, just to warn them. Agronova spun it as a breach of protocol. They fired him, blacklisted him, and scrubbed his name from their internal credits. No lawsuits, no interviews, just silence. And Gideon vanished, left the city, bought a small farm, raised his son. Now that son had just walked onto Stratton's stage and fixed $1 million machine in 5 minutes. By noon, the investors were buzzing not about the harvester's features, but about the boy who saved the demo. Stratton tried to steer the conversation back toward innovation and quarterly projections, but it was like trying to unspill oil on gravel. The damage was already done, and so was the attention. Maya Townsend approached Stratton just as the guests were loading back into black SUVs. "You need to talk to the boy." Stratton kept his tone flat. "Why, we're not in the business of hiring farmhands." "He's not a farmhand," she said. "He's a Bennett. That's exactly why we're not." Maya didn't back down. That machine was dead in the dirt. He fixed it without schematics, without our software tools. I watched him reroute a proprietary power stack by hand. Stratton exhaled slowly, trying to hold on to whatever control he had left. Get me a meeting with the father. The road to the Bennett farm wasn't paved. Stratton's SUV rattled along the gravel path tires, kicking up white dust that clung to the windows. The sun was high now, glaring off the hood like it wanted him to turn back. The place wasn't much. A low house, weathered barn, some rusting machinery off to one side. An old tractor sat in pieces under a carport, a grease-stained rag draped over the engine block, like a flag of surrender. Gideon Bennett was already on the porch, arms crossed, wearing jeans that had seen too many seasons, and boots too heavy to be bought in any store Stratton frequented. His beard was grayer now, but the eyes were the same. Steady, unblinking. Stratton stepped out and shut the door behind him. No entourage, no tablet, just him. Gideon, he said. You got 5 minutes, Gideon replied, not offering a seat. Stratton looked around once. Place hasn't changed. Yours has, Gideon said. The watch alone's different. They stood in silence for a second. Not awkward, just long. Stratton broke first. Your son, he's got your hands. He's got his own. Smarter than me in half the time. He saved the whole day. I know. I want to offer him a future. No. Stratton blinked. You're not even going to hear it. I've heard it. 12 years ago. Same voice. Different pitch. I made a mistake, Stratton admitted. We all did. No, Gideon said, the edge in his voice sharp now. You did. And you made sure I paid for it. Stratton didn't argue. There wasn't much to say. Finally, Gideon sighed. He's his own man now. If he wants to talk to you, he will. But don't come out here thinking you're buying back what you buried. My son owes you nothing. Stratton nodded. That was more than he expected. Back at the car, he paused and looked back once. Gideon was already walking toward the barn. That night, Eli found a manila envelope on the kitchen table. Inside, a formal offer, full scholarship, paid internship, housing, the works. No mention of PR, no branding. Just one line scribbled across the top in pen. Not because of your name, because of your hands. MT Eli looked over at his father, who was sitting on the porch, sipping from a tin cup. Should I take it? Eli asked. Gideon didn't look up. Depends. You want a job or a fight? Eli didn't answer. But by morning, he had packed his bag. The bus to Lincoln was nearly empty when Eli boarded just after dawn. He had a duffel bag with 2 pairs of jeans, 1 button-up shirt, and his father's old multi-tool tucked into the side pocket. He didn't carry much else, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't need to. At 16, Eli Bennett wasn't chasing a dream. He was chasing something far more dangerous, the truth about what kind of man he wanted to become. When he arrived at Agrinova's research facility on the outskirts of the city, he didn't walk through the front door with a badge or a lanyard. He walked through the side loading dock where crates of prototypes were wheeled in and parts were often dropped off without much ceremony. Maya Townsend was waiting for him. She looked tired, like someone who'd had to fight too many internal battles just to get someone in the building who didn't wear khakis and a Bluetooth headset. You really came, she said. Eli nodded. You really meant it. Maya grinned. I did. Let's get to work. They gave him a desk in the systems bay. Not a corner office, not even a cubicle. Just a heavy wooden workbench with a cracked rubber mat, some diagnostic screens, and a whiteboard someone had forgotten to clean. He was sandwiched between 2 senior software engineers who didn't talk much, except when they mumbled about him under their breath. But Eli didn't mind. He wasn't there to make friends. In 3 weeks, he had already mapped the entire circuit architecture of Agrinova's next-gen sensor module. By week 5, he had quietly corrected a navigation error buried deep in the terrain mapping algorithm. He didn't sign his name to the patch. He just left a sticky note on Maya's desk that said, this was causing a delay in hot surface recalibration. Fixed now. Maya said nothing, but the next day she moved him into her core development group. That's when he pitched the idea. We're building for investors, he said one morning. We should be building for farmers. Maya raised an eyebrow. Go on. We spend half our budget making the machine look pretty. Paint-trimmed touchscreen overlays. We use imported aluminum for casing. But the farmers I know, they don't need polish. They need something that works. something they can afford, something that doesn't shut down in the sun. Maya leaned back in her chair. You have specs working on them, but I call it the Prairie Line. Basic, reliable, less than a third of the current model's cost. There was silence. You know Stratton will never go for this, she said. I know, Eli replied, but I'm not asking for his approval. I'm just building. At night, Eli stayed late, not in the main lab, but in a forgotten maintenance bay where older prototypes sat collecting dust. He used scrap parts and salvaged modules. He coded firmware from scratch on a refurbished laptop. Every once in a while, Maya would stop by and leave a thermos of black coffee and a bag of trail mix on his bench. She never asked questions. She just watched. The prototype started to take shape, a lean, stripped-down cultivator with manual override levers and heat-resistant wiring. It didn't have voice commands. It didn't need Wi-Fi. What it had was muscle logic and the kind of durability you could leave out in a Nebraska thunderstorm without worrying. Eli kept the name Prairie Line Model. Word spread. One night, a junior engineer named Dominic snuck in and saw the design. This thing could change everything, he whispered. You showed this to Stratton, yet no. Why not? Because he'll try to own it. Eli wasn't being paranoid. He was being practical. He'd seen what Agronova did to his father. And while Maya had earned his trust, Stratton was still the kind of man who could turn a legacy into leverage. So he built quietly, until one day the silence was broken. Stratton's voice was cool and clipped over the speakerphone in Maya's office. You're aware the Bennett boy is developing an unsanctioned prototype on company property. Maya didn't flinch. He's using salvaged parts. He's not diverting resources. I don't care. Shut it down. You should see it first. No. There was a pause. Then I'll bring it to the board, she said. That a threat? That's a promise. Maya ended the call without another word. Eli stood at the door. You know he's going to try to take it, he said. I know, she replied. That night, Eli backed up every line of code. He packed his laptop and his notes. The next morning, he returned to the Bennett farm. He wasn't running. He was just regrouping, and the prototype. He kept working on it in his dad's shed next to the old planter they'd rebuilt together years ago. Gideon didn't say much. But one night after Eli had fallen asleep at his bench, Gideon placed a folded tarp over the machine, turned off the light and whispered, "Keep going." Weeks passed, then months, and slowly something began to happen. Farmers started hearing about it, first through whispers, then through photos, then through someone's cousin who swore he saw it working in a test plot outside Denton. And then one afternoon, a man in a pressed shirt and polished shoes knocked on the barn door. His name was Darius Kinney, late 30s, VP of Product Innovation at Agronova. He wasn't here to threaten. He was here to hire. I've seen the logs, he told Eli. I've seen the repair diagnostics. You didn't just build a cheaper machine. You built a better one. Eli folded his arms. Then why did Stratton shut it down? Darius didn't blink. Because he's afraid of things he can't control. I'm not. He opened a folder. Inside were documents for a new R&D division, independent. Agile, no PR, no branding. I want you on the team. I already have a team, Eli said. It's just me. Then I want to join yours. Eli didn't answer right away, but Gideon watched from the window, and for the first time in a long time, he smiled. The fairgrounds in Tulsa weren't much to look at, just a handful of rickety booths, hand-painted signs, and the kind of dirt lot that turned into thick clay when it rained. But for Eli Bennett, it was perfect. This wasn't a trade show or a tech summit. There were no LED banners, no press badges, no catered lunches with embossed napkins. It was just rows of real people farmers in straw hats and sun-faded shirts, families pushing strollers through the dust, and kids tugging at their parents' sleeves every time they passed the corn dog stand. And in the center of it all, between the antique tractor display and a booth selling homemade irrigation tools, stood a small green canopy with a single machine underneath it, the Prairie Line model. No polish, no chrome trim, just sturdy metal heat-tested wiring and a sign that read, "Built to work." Built for you. Eli didn't have a sales pitch. He didn't need one. Word had already gotten out. By noon, there was a line of farmers stretching 20 deep, A man from Kansas asked if it would handle hilly terrain. Eli walked him through the manual override settings and dual-axis balancing system. A woman from Oklahoma asked if she'd need special training. Eli showed her the two-step ignition process and pointed to the color-coded controls. If you can drive a four-wheeler, he said, you can run this. A retired couple from Arkansas just stared at the machine for a while. Then the old man took off his cap, ran a hand over the casing, and said, "This is the first time I've seen something that makes sense in 20 years." By mid-afternoon, Eli had taken deposits for 12 units. By sundown, he'd run out of flyers. And through it all, sitting in a folding chair beneath a faded umbrella, was Gideon. Thermos in hand, quiet pride in his eyes. He didn't say much, just watched. It was Maya who showed up unannounced, stepping off a city-rented sedan, wearing jeans and a company t-shirt. Eli spotted her and smiled. "Thought you couldn't make it. I told Stratton I was visiting family. He buy it. He doesn't ask questions when you don't give him reasons." She stepped closer to the machine, running a hand along the front mount. "It's beautiful. It's functional. Same thing if you build it right." She handed him an envelope. Inside were signed letters from 3 small co-ops offering partnership deals. Not buyouts, not branding, just honest distribution through trusted rural supply networks. Eli looked up. "You did this, no. You did this." "I just answered my phone." And then, as if summoned by heat and ego alone, the last person Eli wanted to see appeared. Raymond Stratton. He didn't come with a camera crew. No staff, no limo. Just him. Shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. Eyes scanning the crowd like a wolf hunting on the wrong side of the fence. He walked up to the Prairie Line machine and circled it once. Then he said, without even looking at Eli, "I want to license it." Eli didn't blink. "No." Stratton looked at him now. "Name your price. It's not for sale. You could reach 10 times the market with our platform." "I'm not trying to reach your market. I'm trying to reach the people you skipped over." Stratton's jaw tightened. He took a slow breath. "You're making a mistake." "No," Eli said. "I'm making a choice." There was a silence then, one that stretched like barbed wire between them. And then Stratton asked something he probably never imagined he would. "What would your father do?" Eli didn't hesitate. "He'd say I was wasting time talking to a man who only shows up when something's already working." Then he turned back toward the crowd. Stratton didn't follow. He just stood there a moment longer, then walked away without another word. 2 weeks later, the first Prairie Line unit rolled off a converted assembly line in a former feed storage warehouse. It wasn't fast, it wasn't flashy, but it was his. Eli hired 2 local welders, 1 retired electrical technician, and a college kid who knew enough code to be dangerous. They worked late into the nights, laughing, arguing, fixing, improving. And every time someone tried to slap a logo on the casing, Eli stopped them. "This isn't about me, it's about the people who use it." One afternoon, an email arrived from Stratton's office. Subject: Media Feature Request Message. "We'd like to profile your story as part of AgroNova's Rural Innovation Series." Eli didn't even open it. He just archived it. But he did reply to a different message, one from a farmer named Terry in South Dakota. Terry's old cultivator had broken down, and his spring season was at risk. Eli personally loaded a demo unit onto a trailer and drove it up himself. He didn't pose for a photo. He didn't write a press release. He just handed Terry the keys, showed him the controls, and said, "Call me if something rattles." That night, Gideon and Eli sat on the porch, their boots kicked up on the railing. "You proud of it?" Gideon asked. Eli didn't answer right away. "I'm proud it's useful," he finally said. "You should be," Gideon nodded. "Not just because it works, but because you remembered who it's for." The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the fields, and for once they let the silence stay. 6 months later, the Bennett shed didn't look like a shed anymore. It looked like an idea with walls. What started as a hobby corner next to a broken-down planter had become a mini production bay, 3 workbenches, 2 soldering stations, a repurposed 3D printer, and a parts wall cobbled together from pallets and old fence boards. But the most important thing wasn't what was in the shop. It was who came through it. A boy named Jesse from 2 farms over stopped by every week after school just to sweep the floors and watch Eli work. A retired mechanic from Grand Island volunteered to help calibrate engines for free. Even the coffee guy from the local diner started delivering thermoses in the mornings, saying, if you're going to change the world, you need caffeine. That wasn't exaggeration. By then, 24 Prairie Line units were running in fields across 5 states. They weren't always perfect. A few had wiring issues. One had a cracked axle weld that Eli insisted on driving 3 hours to fix himself. But they worked, and more importantly, they were wanted. The farmers didn't care that it didn't look like something from Silicon Valley. They cared that it could handle rain, heat, and stubborn weeds without shutting down. They cared that it cost less than half of what Agrinova charged and came with a handwritten manual and Eli's phone number scrawled on the inside cover. Still, the pressure was building. Agrinova had tried 3 more times to buy him out, first through polite emails, then through a very polished lawyer, and finally through a third-party investor who pretended to be independent until Eli recognized the formatting on the contract. Each time he said no. But it was the 4th attempt that tested him. It came not from a stranger, but from Darius Kinney, the VP who had once believed in him. Just hear me out, Darius said, sitting across from Eli in the shed one cold November evening. We're building a next-gen platform. You'd have full control, real control. Your machines, your code, your team. Eli looked at him for a long time. You're offering me everything I asked for 2 years ago. I am. Why now? Darius didn't lie. Because now we need you. Eli didn't raise his voice. He didn't even blink. That's the problem. And with that, the offer died. By Christmas, Eli had launched an online portal. Not flashy, just a simple site where farmers could sign up, request demos, and download firmware updates. He uploaded how-to videos from the shop, rough, unedited clips of him fixing parts, explaining features, and answering questions in plain English. He called the series For the Hands That Feed Us. It went viral not with the masses, but with the right people. By the time spring rolled around, he had back orders from 11 states and 2 Canadian provinces. He still hadn't hired a PR firm, still hadn't signed a distribution deal, still refused to print a single ad. And yet the story kept spreading. At the National Ag-Tech Expo in St. Louis, someone presented a slide showing Prairie Line's growth. Stratton sat 2 rows from the front, arms folded. He didn't say a word. But after the presentation, he stood quietly in the back of the hall and made one final call. This time to Gideon. It was short. I underestimated your son, Stratton said. You did, Gideon replied. I'd like to meet him. He doesn't need your blessing. It's not about that. I think I'd like to learn something. There was a long pause on the line. Then Gideon said, that's up to him. But if you come honest. 2 weeks later, Stratton arrived unannounced at the fairground in Tulsa, the same place where it all started. Eli was setting up another demo this time with a newer version of the Prairie Line. It had better insulation, a solar assist module, and a simplified control system designed specifically for aging farmers with arthritis. Stratton walked up slowly. No jacket, no clipboard, no one beside him. He looked around at the dust, the machines, the quiet hum of purpose. Then he looked at Eli and said, You built something I couldn't. Eli didn't answer. Stratton cleared his throat. I'm not here to pitch. Or to buy. I just wanted to see it. Eli nodded. Now you have. Stratton looked down at the nameplate etched into the machine. Prairie Line, built for the people who grow the nation. He read it once, then again. Did your father help with that line? No, Eli said. That one was mine. Stratton looked up and extended a hand. Eli hesitated, then shook it. It wasn't forgiveness, it was closure. And that was enough. The next day back at the Bennett farm, Eli and Gideon sat on the porch again. The fields rolled out ahead of them, golden and soft under the late afternoon sun. You think it's done? Gideon asked. No, Eli said. It's just beginning. They watched as one of the Prairie Line machines crawled across the west field, steady, reliable, unfazed by the slope of the hill or the setting sun. A machine that didn't belong to a corporation. A machine that didn't need to impress investors. A machine built by a boy, for the people his father never forgot. And out there in the dust and the quiet, justice wasn't just done. It was built. Sometimes we think justice only shows up in courtrooms or headlines when someone's caught, when someone's punished. But real justice, the kind that sticks, often shows up quietly, in a dusty shed, in calloused hands, in a young man who chooses principle over praise. Eli Bennett didn't set out to embarrass anyone. He didn't care about revenge. He cared about doing right by the land, by his neighbors, and by the father who once walked away from everything just to protect what mattered. There's a lesson here for all of us. Whether you're working a field or working a desk job, whether you're 16 or 60, you don't need permission to do the right thing. And when someone tells you that you're not enough, that your voice is too small or your boots too muddy, remember, Eli. Remember that the people who build quietly often build the strongest. So maybe next time something breaks in your life, something mechanical, something personal, something deep, you'll ask yourself, am I waiting for someone else to fix it? Or can I be the one to walk forward, tools in hand, and try anyway? That's what justice really is. Not revenge, not applause, just doing what's right when it's hard and when it counts.